What happens when America's sweetheart of home design meets daytime television's most beloved host, and everything goes catastrophically wrong? What you're about to witness is one of the most shocking celebrity confrontations ever caught on live television. Joanna Gaines, the woman who built an empire on farmhouse chic and family values, completely loses her composure on the Drew Barrymore Show in a way that nobody saw coming. This isn't your typical celebrity interview gone slightly awkward. This is a full-blown explosion that left the studio audience gasping, and Drew Barrymore herself visibly shaken. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, telling me what you think really triggered Joanna's outburst. Trust me, you're going to have opinions after hearing this. The setup seemed innocent enough. Joanna Gaines was scheduled for what should have been a routine promotional appearance on the Drew Barrymore Show. She was there to talk about her latest book, share some design tips, and probably charm the audience with stories about life on the farm with Chip and the kids. Drew Barrymore, known for her warm interviewing style and genuine curiosity about her guests, had prepared what she thought would be a delightful conversation about home, family, and following your dreams. But from the moment Joanna walked onto that set, something felt off. Those who were there described a tension that seemed to hang in the air like a storm cloud waiting to burst. Joanna's usual bright smile appeared forced, her posture was unusually rigid, and when Drew greeted her, with her characteristic enthusiasm, Joanna's response was noticeably cool. "Joanna, welcome back to the show," Drew began, settling into her chair with that warm energy she's known for. "I have to say, every time I see what you and Chip have created with Magnolia, I'm just in awe. How do you manage to make everything look so effortless and beautiful?" Joanna shifted in her seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Well, Drew, I think people sometimes mistake hard work for effortlessness. There's nothing effortless about building a brand from the ground up while raising 5 children and maintaining the integrity of your vision." The audience didn't catch it initially, but those familiar with Joanna's usual interview demeanor noticed the subtle edge in her voice. Drew, ever the professional, smiled and nodded encouragingly. "Oh, absolutely, and that's what makes it so inspiring. Speaking of inspiration, I read in your book about how important it is to create spaces that tell stories. Can you share with our audience what story your own home tells?" "My home tells the story of a family that values privacy, authenticity, and being left alone to live their lives without constant scrutiny and judgment," Joanna replied, her tone growing noticeably sharper. "It tells the story of people who believe that not everything needs to be dissected and analyzed for public consumption." Drew's eyebrows raised slightly, sensing the unexpected direction of the conversation. "That's beautiful, Joanna. And speaking of stories, there have been some fascinating stories in the media lately about celebrity families and how they navigate fame. How do you and Chip handle when people speculate about your personal lives?" This was the moment everything changed. Joanna's entire demeanor shifted like a switch had been flipped. Her jaw tightened, her eyes narrowed, and when she spoke, her voice carried a steel that nobody in that studio had ever heard from the usually composed designer. "Drew, are you seriously going to sit there and pretend like you don't know exactly what you're doing right now? Are you going to act like this innocent question about handling speculation isn't a direct reference to the garbage that your network has been pushing about my marriage for the past 6 months?" The studio fell dead silent. You could hear a pin drop as Drew's face registered complete shock. The cameramen weren't sure whether to keep rolling or cut away, but they kept filming, capturing every second of what was about to become television history. "Joanna, I'm not sure what you're referring to," Drew stammered, clearly caught off guard. "I was just making conversation about how celebrity families deal with media attention in general." "Don't," Joanna's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Don't you dare sit there and gaslight me on your own show. Your producers called my team 3 times asking specifically about the rumors that Chip and I are having problems. They wanted me to address the speculation about our marriage being in trouble. They pitched this interview as an opportunity for me to set the record straight about my family's private business." Drew's face went pale. The audience was now fully aware that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Some people were pulling out their phones, others were whispering to each other, and a few were actually getting up to leave, sensing the discomfort in the room. "Joanna, I swear to you that I had no knowledge of any of those conversations, Drew said, her voice trembling slightly. My team handles the pre-interview coordination, and I specifically ask not to be briefed on anything controversial, because I want my conversations with guests to be authentic and spontaneous. Authentic and spontaneous. Joanna laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what we're calling ambush journalism now? Because that's exactly what this is, Drew. You brought me here under false pretenses, and now you're trying to mine my personal life for content while pretending like you're just being friendly and curious. The tension in the room was becoming unbearable. Drew was visibly struggling to regain control of the interview, her hands shaking slightly as she reached for her water glass. I understand you're upset, and I want to make this right, Drew said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I genuinely had no idea about any of those producer calls. I would never ambush a guest, especially not about something as personal as their marriage. Joanna stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor with a harsh sound that made everyone in the studio wince. You know what, Drew? Maybe you're telling the truth. Maybe you really don't know what your own team is doing in your name. But that doesn't make this any less of a betrayal of trust. Standing there with her hands on her hips, Joanna looked down at Drew with an intensity that made the entire studio hold its breath. The woman who had spent years perfecting the art of gracious Southern hospitality was about to show America a side of herself that nobody knew existed. You want to know what the real problem is here, Drew? Joanna continued, her voice rising with each word. It's not just your producers, it's this entire culture of fake intimacy that you've all created. In daytime television, you invite people onto your show, you make them feel comfortable and safe, and then you use that trust to extract the most vulnerable parts of their lives for entertainment. Drew remained seated, her face flushed with embarrassment and confusion. Joanna, please, can we just take a step back here? I think there's been a massive misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Joanna's voice cracked with disbelief. Drew, your head producer literally told my publicist that you were hoping to get me to open up about the challenges in my marriage because, quote, viewers connect with vulnerability and it would be great for my book sales. Does that sound like a misunderstanding to you? The audience was completely transfixed. Some people were recording on their phones, others were covering their mouths in shock. The camera operators kept zooming in on both women, capturing every micro-expression of this unprecedented meltdown. Drew's eyes filled with tears. I am so sorry, Joanna. I had no idea any of that was said to your team. That goes against everything I believe in as an interviewer and as a person. I would never exploit someone's personal struggles for ratings. But that's exactly what you're doing right now, Joanna shot back. Even as you're apologizing, you're still filming this. You're still going to use every second of my breakdown for content. You're going to edit this together with dramatic music and compelling graphics and turn my genuine hurt into clickbait. Drew looked desperately toward her producers off camera, as if pleading for someone to help her navigate this disaster. No help came. She turned back to Joanna with tears now openly streaming down her face. What do you want me to do? Do you want me to stop filming? Do you want to end the interview right now? I will do whatever you need me to do to make this right. Joanna paused for a moment, seeming to consider the offer. Then she shook her head slowly. You know what, Drew? No, let's keep rolling. Let's give your audience exactly what they came for. You want vulnerability. You want to see behind the perfectly curated facade. Here it is. She sat back down but perched on the edge of her chair like a coiled spring ready to launch again. Do you have any idea what it's like to build something beautiful with someone you love, only to have strangers constantly trying to tear it apart for their own amusement? Do you know what it feels like to have people analyze every photo, every public appearance, looking for cracks in your foundation? Drew wiped her eyes with a tissue that someone from her team had quickly provided. I can only imagine how difficult that must be. No, you can't imagine it, Joanna interrupted, because you've made a career out of being open about your struggles. You've monetized your divorces, your mental health journey, your parenting challenges. You've turned your pain into profit, so you think everyone else should do the same. The accusation hung in the air like a physical blow. Drew visibly recoiled as if she'd been slapped. That's not fair, Joanna. I share my experiences because I think it helps people feel less alone in their struggles. And that's your choice, Joanna replied, her voice still sharp but slightly less aggressive. "But it doesn't give you the right to pressure other people to do the same. Not everyone wants to live their life as an open book for public consumption." Drew nodded slowly, seeming to finally understand the depth of Joanna's frustration. "You're absolutely right, and I am genuinely sorry that my team put you in this position. This conversation should have been about your book, your design philosophy, your creative process. Not about your marriage or your personal life. But here's the thing, Drew," Joanna continued, leaning forward intensely. "It's not just your team. This is systemic. This is how this entire industry operates. You book guests under the pretense of promoting their work, but what you really want is their trauma, their secrets, their private moments of doubt and struggle." The studio audience was completely silent now, absorbed in what had become less of an interview and more of a brutal examination of celebrity culture and media ethics. Drew looked around the room, seeming to see her show and her industry through Joanna's eyes for the first time. "I never thought about it that way," Drew admitted quietly. "I've always tried to create a space where people feel comfortable sharing, but I never considered that the very act of creating that space might feel like pressure to some guests." "It does," Joanna said firmly. "And when they don't share, when they try to keep their boundaries intact, they get labeled as difficult or fake or calculating. There's no winning." Drew took a shaky breath. "So how do we fix this? How do we do better?" Joanna stared at her for a long moment, as if evaluating whether the question was genuine or just another performance. Finally, she spoke. "You start by having this conversation with your producers before your guests arrive, not after you've already traumatized them on live television." The words stung, and Drew flinched visibly. "That's fair. That's completely fair." "Is it, though?" Joanna asked, her voice taking on a new edge. "Because I'm sitting here educating you about basic human decency, and you're going to get praised for being so open to feedback and growth. Meanwhile, I'm going to be labeled as the difficult guest who had a meltdown on your show." Drew opened her mouth to protest, but Joanna held up her hand to stop her. Don't tell me that won't happen, because we both know it will. The headlines are already writing themselves in producers' minds. Joanna Gaines loses it on Drew Barrymore Show. Magnolia founders' shocking outburst. Design queen's dramatic breakdown. The accuracy of her prediction was chilling, because everyone in that room knew she was right. The narrative was already forming, and there was nothing either of them could do to stop it. "So what happens now?" Drew asked quietly. Joanna stood up again, but this time her movement was measured and deliberate rather than explosive. "Now I'm going to walk off your set with whatever dignity I have left, and you're going to air this interview exactly as it happened, without any dramatic editing or manipulative music. Because that would be the ethical thing to do." Drew nodded. "Slowly, I give you my word that we'll treat this footage with respect." "We'll see," Joanna replied, gathering her purse and preparing to leave. But then she paused and turned back to face Drew one more time. That pause, that moment when Joanna turned back to face Drew one final time, contained more tension than most people experience in a lifetime. The entire studio was frozen, waiting to see what final blow America's home design sweetheart would deliver to one of television's most beloved hosts. "You know what, Drew?" Joanna said, her voice now eerily calm compared to the fire that had been burning just moments before. "I actually feel sorry for you." Drew's face crumpled with confusion. "And hurt." "What do you mean?" "I mean that you've been so conditioned by this industry to believe that intimacy equals entertainment that you probably genuinely don't understand why what happened here today was wrong," Joanna explained, her tone taking on an almost maternal quality that was somehow more cutting than her earlier anger. "You sit in that chair every day and you smile and you laugh and you cry with your guests, and you think that makes you different from all the other talk show hosts who are just mining people's lives for content. But the end result is exactly the same." Drew wiped her eyes again, struggling to maintain her composure. "I really do care about my guests, Joanna. I'm not just pretending to connect with people." "I believe you," Joanna replied, and for a moment Drew looked relieved. "But that almost makes it worse, doesn't it? Because your genuine care becomes part of the manipulation. People trust you because they can see that you really do empathize with them. And then that trust becomes the very thing that makes them vulnerable to exploitation." The audience was witnessing something unprecedented in daytime television. a complete deconstruction of the entire format happening in real time. Drew looked around desperately, as if hoping someone would throw her a lifeline. "So what are you saying, that I should quit my job? That I should stop trying to connect with people?" Drew asked, her voice breaking. "I'm saying that you should ask yourself whether the connection you're creating is actually helping your guests, or whether it's just helping your ratings," Joanna answered without hesitation. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've built a career on making people feel safe enough to expose themselves on television. And then you profit from that exposure while they go home and deal with the consequences." Drew was openly sobbing now, and normally that would have prompted Joanna to soften her approach to offer comfort or reassurance. But she didn't move from her position, didn't reach out to console the crying host. "The worst part," Joanna continued, relentlessly, "is that you've convinced yourself that you're doing good work. You think that by sharing your own struggles and encouraging others to do the same, you're helping people. But you're not helping them, Drew. You're teaching them that their pain is only valuable if it can be packaged and sold to an audience." "That's not what I'm trying to do," Drew protested through her tears. "But it's what you are doing," Joanna replied firmly. "Every time you praise a guest for being brave enough to share something deeply personal, you're reinforcing the idea that vulnerability is a performance. Every time you thank someone for opening up about their trauma or their struggles, you're commodifying their pain." The silence in the studio was deafening. Even the crew members who had been moving around quietly during the earlier part of the confrontation had stopped what they were doing to listen. "I came on your show today to talk about design, about creating beautiful spaces that nurture families and communities," Joanna said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I came here to share something I'm passionate about, something I've spent years perfecting, something that brings joy to people's lives. But instead, your team wanted to turn my marriage into a storyline." Drew looked up at her with red, swollen eyes. "I'm so sorry, Joanna. I'm so incredibly sorry. Your apology doesn't change anything," Joanna replied coldly, "because this isn't about you personally, Drew. This is about a system that you're part of, a system that treats people's private lives like content to be consumed. And your apology, as sincere as it might be, doesn't protect the next guest who walks onto this set." Drew nodded slowly, seeming to understand the weight of what Joanna was saying. "What can I do? How can I change this?" Joanna studied her for a long moment, as if deciding whether Drew was capable of real change or just looking for absolution. "You can start by having a very serious conversation with your producers about what kinds of questions are acceptable and what kinds of storylines you're willing to pursue. You can stop rewarding guests for sharing trauma with praise and gratitude, as if their pain is a gift to your audience. And you can acknowledge that some things are more important than good television," Joanna continued. "Some conversations should happen in private, between friends or family or therapists, not in front of cameras for the entertainment of strangers." Drew was nodding vigorously now, hanging on every word. "Yes, absolutely. I hear you, and I want to do better. Do you, though?" Joanna asked skeptically. "Or are you just saying what you think I want to hear so that this interview can end on a more positive note? Because even now, even in the middle of this confrontation, you're still performing. Drew, you're still thinking about how this looks to your audience." The accusation hit like a physical blow, and Drew actually recoiled in her chair. "I don't know how to turn it off," she admitted in a whisper. "I don't know how to just be a person instead of a host." For the first time since the confrontation began, Joanna's expression softened slightly. "That's the saddest thing you've said all day." Drew looked up at her with a mixture of hope and desperation. "Will you help me figure out how to do better?" Joanna shook her head slowly. "That's not my job, Drew. I'm not your life coach or your therapist. I'm a guest who came on your show to promote a book and instead got ambushed about my personal life. The work of fixing your show and your approach to interviewing is something you need to do yourself." With that, Joanna turned and began walking toward the exit. But just before she reached the edge of the set, she stopped one final time. "For what it's worth, Drew, I hope you figure it out, because you have a platform that could genuinely help people if you used it differently. But right now, you're just another person profiting from other people's pain, and that's not helping anyone." The studio remained completely silent as Joanna walked off the set, leaving Drew sitting alone in her chair, tears still streaming down her face. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of the aftermath. The stunned audience, the shocked host, the empty chair where Joanna had been sitting just minutes before, and that's where our story ends, with one of the most shocking confrontations in daytime television history. Joanna Gaines, the woman who built an empire on kindness and hospitality, delivered one of the most brutal takedowns ever witnessed on live television. She didn't just challenge Drew Barrymore. She challenged an entire industry and the way it treats people's private lives as public entertainment. What do you think? Was Joanna right to call out the whole system, or did she go too far? Drop a comment below and let me know whether you think Drew Barrymore deserved that level of confrontation. And don't forget to subscribe for more shocking celebrity stories that you won't see anywhere else.